Adulting is hard. It really is difficult. One thing about adulting that I have mixed feelings about is ownership. I don't know if you've ever signed a contract or papers for owning a house or maybe owning a car or maybe a big business deal that you were in charge of. This ownership of this thing where they have you initial here, initial here, initial here, initial here, and then finally you sign your name at the end and you own it. Like there's a certain celebration. I remember signing the papers to own land and then build my house and signing those mortgage papers and being there and be like, yes, I own my own home. This is so wonderful. And then I realized I own my own home. I'm responsible for it, right? That's what ownership is. Ownership is literally like taking responsibility or control for something. And we all experience this throughout adulthood. When you own something, yes, it's yours. But when you own something, it's also your responsibility. It's under your control. You have to figure out. So I'm doing home maintenance on my home, and I have to keep things up, and I have to pay to fix this and pay to fix this because it's mine. And I wish it were somebody else's sometimes so I could be like, hey, you got to come fix this. It's your problem. You own it, right? And that's really what ownership is about. But I went into the hospital a few weeks ago, and I was taking my daughter in for some testing. She was having a few issues, nothing serious, but we were going to do an x-ray. And so we went in there, and they had all these papers at the registration desk. And I remember they were like, hey, there were 4 places for me to initial and 1 place for me to sign. And it was a front and back form. And it had all this small print, bolded form, bolded words, and all this kind of stuff. And like, oh, yeah, this just means that you're agreeing to this, and you're agreeing to this, and you're agreeing to this. And on the back of it, you're agreeing to this, and you just sign here, and we're done. And I'm thinking, well, if it just means that, why isn't that just on the paper, not all these other words? What else am I signing on for here? What else am I initialing to? What else am I owning? It just seemed like there was a whole lot of things there that I didn't know if I was ready to own. And that's kind of what a contract's for, isn't it? A contract is to determine the limits of each party's ownership and their control. So when you go into any kind of contract, you go into any kind of agreement you're making, you're signing and initialing, this is what this party's going to own, and this is what this party's going to own. We'll take care of this, you'll take care of that. If you do this, then we'll be able to do that. And if you do that, then we'll be able to do this. And that's how our partnerships work. It's funny, though, if you read the fine print on those contracts, did you know that there are allowances for things that nobody can control? That's right. Because we all recognize something about adult life that we don't like to admit out front. It's basically this next slide. We all recognize our control of our own lives is actually limited. That's why we have in contracts a place for, now, if we do this and you do this, but still we don't get the results, that's okay. We're just not going to be held responsible for it. Right? There's this gap between what we all know we can control. Think about it. You know this in your health. There are things that you keep doing to try to stay healthy, and yet it doesn't matter. There are sometimes you go to the doctor and you're just not well. Or you get a diagnosis that you weren't expecting. Or in your finances, right? You're working this job and it seems so steady, and you're like, I'm in control of my life, and then suddenly the economics just, man, it's gone. Job gone. Business gone. And you're left searching for something else. And it's not that we don't have a lot of control. We do. We have some things we can choose. We get to choose where we go to school, what we do with our lives, or kind of whether we pursue a job or whether we switch jobs. We get all kinds of choices within that. But I think sometimes as adults, what our tendency is to do is to kind of ignore this feeling of out of control. And the way we do that is we kind of build around ourselves a view of God that helps us still stay in control. So I want to show you some ways. I want you to kind of do this, kind of like a personality test today. I want you to take a personality test with me and see which one of these views of God most closely matches kind of how you attempt to view God. And some of you are like saying, well, I don't really have a view of God. I'm not sure I even believe in God. That's okay. I've got you in here too. I just want you to think about, how does your view of God change when you think about this idea of being out of control or having limited control of your life? Because none of us want to admit that we're completely out of control. There's got to be some way for us to control some of these things that are out of control in our lives. So we kind of develop this sense of who God is or how God is supposed to respond to us. So let me just walk you through a few of these to help you think about which one of these is closest to you. So some of you are life over God people. You see your life as kind of over God. Not that you're above God or anything, but you're kind of not sure that God is even really involved in your life, or maybe He doesn't really exist. Maybe He set things in motion and then walked away. But for you, most of life, and especially the things that are out of your control, you define by just getting to know more stuff. In fact, you would basically say, I don't need God. I just need the principles and the systems that will help me have a good life. So you see life over God as a way for you to learn enough about how life works, that if you can learn about relationships or leadership and management, or how business works, or how your health works, or how your body works, or how all these different things, if you can learn enough from science and from psychology and from different leaders and all this kind of stuff, you can learn enough, then you'll have enough knowledge to continue moving on. And you'll be able to, at least in some ways, maybe you can't control everything, but I'll be in more control than most people because I'll have enough knowledge to control what it is that's happening in my life. And most of the time, when you find yourself out of control, it's because you didn't learn something, and you just need to learn something so that you can continue on next time controlling that aspect of your life. So you're a life over God person. Now, some of you aren't over God. Some of you are life under God people. In fact, you may have grown up in the church, and since you were very young, you realized that God had expectations or kind of requirements for your behavior. And since that moment, or maybe sometime in your adulthood, you switched from over to under. Maybe you were an over God person, but somebody convinced you to be an under God person. Hey, God has these certain things you're supposed to do that make your life better, and if you'll do those, then that's the way to make Him happy. And if you can get God to be happy with you, you'll be under His authority and under His care, and when He's happy, you can be happy. So if you can behave well enough, if you can do the thing God expects you to do, you'll be okay. And so the things that are out of control tend to be taken care of by God and you getting things back under control in your life. There's also another one. You could be life from God. Now, some of you see life as a way to get things from God. Like your point of view right now is that, well, I can't get everything in life, so I need someone greater than me to give them to me. So the point is, if I can't make my business work, I pray to God and He'll give me a better business. If I can't make this work in my relationship, I pray to God and boom, He gives me this gift and I've got things from God. Your whole kind of orientation around how to control things out of your control is to let God bring them to you. And you are ready to receive everything that God could possibly give you. And so your whole orientation toward God is you're waiting for Him to give you what's next. What is it next? God, what's the next blessing? I'm waiting to be blessed by you, God. I'm just waiting. Go ahead and give me what I need, right, from God. The last one is this. Maybe you're a life for God. Like you look at those other three and you're like, that's not me. I'm not over and I'm not under. I'm not from. I'm doing things for God. See, I know He died for me. He sent His Son. He died on the cross. He rose again. I'm doing things for God. And my whole life is oriented around serving. And actually, honestly, if I were to be honest, my life is really about making my life difficult so I can prove to people that I'm doing what God asked me to do. And a lot of you, if you're in this life for God situation, a lot of you are like considering, am I supposed to go into the mission field or am I supposed to like go into business? Like for you, like going into business seems wrong almost because you're doing life for God. And if I were doing life for God right, then I would do only things for God and my whole life would be aligned around these things I could do for Him and make sure that I do that to show how grateful I am. Now, here's the thing all of you are wondering. You've maybe picked one of those four. Some of you are probably like rebels like I am and like, no. But honestly, if I look back in my life, I've been all four of these at different points in my life. The problem with all four of these is that they have truth in them, but they are not the whole truth by themselves. See, I think sometimes our desire for control drives us to an immature view of God. And that immature view of God keeps us from maturing as people. See, when we have only a shrunken view of what God's supposed to look like, we often get a shrunken view of what we are responsible for and what God is responsible for. And we lose track. We're just trying to use these four kind of approaches to God to make sure that we can stay in control of things that seem scary or out of control. So let me walk you back through all four of these real quick. Because I believe I would love for you to identify kind of maybe the one that you've been living in and the problems it's created for you. And then how this view of God could be something that's keeping you from growing, keeping you from maturing, keeping you from adulting really well. So let's walk back through these four. If you're a life over God person, you may find that you rarely admit needing help from others or God. You don't need help from God. You don't need help from other people. You just need the formula. I just need the right answer. I just need you to tell me where I'm supposed to put my money and who I'm supposed to spend time with and how I'm supposed to figure out how to do this next step in life and how to figure out which job I'm supposed to take of the two that are choice. I just need to know the how. I don't need the who. I don't need anybody around me to help. I just need answers to. And a lot of times you find yourself unwilling to accept God or unwilling to accept other people who are trying to help you. And your maturity gets thrown back because, honestly, you start blaming other people in your life when the formula doesn't work. See, when you're doing things the right way and you've got this formula figured out and everything is supposed to be done this one way and you start doing it and then things don't work out and they're out of your control, you start looking at the other people in your life going, it's because you're not following the formula. You're not doing it right. And your tendency is to put yourself in this box over here by yourself, where you're left alone to figure out how to manage everything in your life. And that's not really where you want to be. But because of your view of God, that's the only thing you know of right now. It's the only response you have. Now, if you're a life under God, you may struggle to show grace to yourself and other people. Here's what I found about this one, and I used to be this one. See, I thought that if I could do good enough at things, then I could make God happy enough, and then He would solve all my problems. But what it built in me, I was unable to actually forgive myself when I got it wrong, and I was unable to forgive other people when they got it wrong. Because man, God's got rules and He's got things He's supposed to, expectations for us, and we're supposed to do them, and we're not doing them. Man, we are wrong. We are so wrong, and that's why life is going wrong for you right now. And rather than having mercy and compassion for someone, I looked at them and told them what they were doing wrong. And then when things went wrong in my own life, I tend to blame myself because if I could live better, then I would get better. If there was some way for me just to be under God's authority better, if I could just get it figured out just right, then I would be able to fix all these problems in my life. And that wasn't always the case. It's because these two views are so limited. They're actually on opposite ends of the spectrum. You've got this where no God is really involved at all, and God is so involved that everything is so super important. And some people like to cross between over and under God and under and over, and they flip back and forth between these two, but they're really doing the same thing. They're trying to control God. They're trying to put God in a place where I can get from Him what I need. Same is true for the other two. If you're alive from God, you avoid helping meet the needs of other people oftentimes. Because you're expecting God to give you what you need. Well, God should just give them what they need. Because He's gifted me and He's given me, so the extra bonus check you get from your work, that's for you. And the pat on the back you get at work for doing such a great job, that's all for you. And when people tell you, man, your kids, man, they're so good, they're such good kids, man, you must be a great parent, that's all for you. And all these things that you get, and you're like, blessed. I'm just blessed by God. I'm just blessed by God. See, that all becomes about you. And so you're less likely to be sharing anything you get. And then you blame God when things go wrong. Because wasn't He supposed to be giving you something? What happened, God? Where did you go? I was getting things from you, and now I'm not getting things from you. So what happened? You must have done something wrong. You must have moved. You must have gone somewhere. And then the life from God switches to life for God sometimes. So we start, if a from doesn't work, then we're like, okay, well, maybe I've just got to work harder at this thing and get on mission with God. And I'm prideful for how well I perform. This is me. I went through a really bad period of this. I was so much better at serving and giving, and I was sacrificing so much more than the people around me. And I would look at them, and I'd be so judgmental. I'd be like, man, I feel sorry for them that they can't figure this out, but I am so on mission right now, and I'm so doing everything that God asked me to do. I'm going to get a huge mansion in heaven. It's going to be huge. It's going to be great. I'm going to get so many rewards in heaven. I won't get them right now. Nobody will know how much I've done. But man, I've got it going on behind the scenes. And I'm not going to brag about it in front of anybody, but I just know in my heart that I'm doing things for God that nobody else is willing to do. And when things go wrong, I can just work my way out of it. Because I can work harder, and I can do better, and I can sacrifice more. And this life for God usually drives you so far away from where other people are that you don't even recognize you're not even on mission anymore. So the problem with all four of these is they're so close. They have truth in them. God does have principles for you to follow. He has set up systems for how relationships work. He set up systems for how your life should work. Those things were gifts from Him to you. So I'm not saying the systems and the principles are bad. We talk about the principles every single week here. But if you only make it about the principles, you miss something. And if you're under God, if you're under His authority, you're right, you are under His authority. He does have expectations for you. He wants you to do things right. But if that is the only way you relate to God, if that is the only orientation you have, you miss something. And if you're only doing from God and for God, you're missing something there as well. You're missing on a chance for God to open up a whole new part of life to you when you shrink your view of God down to these little 4 things. So at this point, I want to tell you a joke to go from this heavy, because some of you are like, man, I didn't know I viewed God that way. That's kind of hard to kind of swallow. I'm not sure I agree yet, but listen, I just want to tell you a joke that kind of exemplifies how we kind of think about this control issue and how we try to control God in the midst of all these circumstances through these different viewpoints. So there was a barber, and he was cutting a customer's hair, and he saw a little boy that came by every day, and he saw him coming down the sidewalk, and he turned to the customer, he said, hey, watch this. This is the dumbest kid in the world, and I'm going to prove it. So the little kid comes in, says hi to everybody, and the barber pulls out a $5 bill and 2 $1 bills. And he offers them up to the kid, and the kid looks at him, he goes, all right, which one you want today? You want the $5 bill, you want the 2 $1? Kid kind of thinks about it, looks at it. He grabs the 2 $1 bills and runs out. And the customer kind of quizzes his look, and the barber goes, I told you, he's the dumbest kid in the world. Prove it. He does it almost every day. Put his $5 back in his pocket. A few minutes later, customer finished up. He walks out, and he sees the kid walking down the sidewalk with an ice cream. And he stops the kid, and he goes, whoa, kid. I think you've missed the point of the game with the barber in there. Like, why didn't you take the $5 bill? And the kid looks up and goes, well, as soon as I take the $5 bill, the game's over. Yeah, it took you a minute on this section, didn't it? Listen, I think here's what we do. We believe that if we can play this game right with God, we can get what we want. If we can just do this the right way, if we can keep playing the game, we can get what we want. The problem is adulting, is owning that you don't own God. You don't own God. See, your view of God is too small. Your view of God is not somebody you can control. The view of God that works, the view of God that He intended, was a view that we are with God and that God is with us. That's how He intended it to work. He wasn't supposed to be over you in the fact that He wasn't connected. He was just giving you a way to live. And He wasn't out of the picture and leaving you to kind of just figure it out for yourself. He's not just here to give you everything you need, and He's not here just to accept everything from you, right? The orientation I want you to kind of explode in your mind is that life with God is what He intended from the very beginning. He wants to be with you wherever you are, wherever you go. And for some of you, that's scary because that means you don't own Him anymore. And you can't manipulate and maneuver Him anymore. So there's a book I took all this from. You're like, man, Jared's so smart. No, I'm not smart. I just read a lot. There's a book called With by a guy named Skye Jethani. You should check it out. But he says this in his book that I think is just so to the point. He said, it has been my experience that when most people hear or think about God, they have a less than complete and sometimes entirely flawed vision of who He is. As a result, they do not tend to desire Him. At best, they see Him as a useful instrument for achieving something more desirous. Have you ever wanted something from God? Have you ever wanted something out of life more than you wanted God? You're like, isn't that the way it's supposed to work? Isn't God supposed to provide for me? Yeah, He's going to provide for you. But listen, He wants you to want Him more than you want anything else. He wants to be with you in a way that He can't be with you when you won't recognize that He is the most important thing that you could possibly ever desire. And instead, you want to use Him as an instrument, something useful to get to the thing in your life, the happiness, the peace, the joy. And instead, He's in the background going, no, wait. Don't you just want me to be with you? Look at this next part. But if their vision were enlarged and corrected, if they could see His unrivaled beauty, grasp His unconditional love, perceive His radiant glory, and experience His untainted goodness, then it would become obvious that He is much more than a deity to be simply tolerated or a device to employ. In other words, God would cease to be how we acquire our treasure. And he would become our treasure. Listen, God knows what you need. God knows what you want. God knows what would be best for you. But the first thing, the best thing, were for you to be with him and him to be with you. And since the beginning, that's the way he designed it. So I'm going to walk you through in super fast motion from beginning until current times what God has said over and over and over again about being with us. In the garden, he put Adam and Eve there. And in Genesis, it said he walked with them in the cool of the day. And then he called Abraham. And in Genesis, it says to Abraham, Abraham, I want you to go. I want you to go to a different land. I will show you. And you're going to start a whole new nation of people that will bless all peoples. And I want you to go there. And when he went there, it says, at that time, Abimelek and Phicol, the commander of his forces, said to Abraham, God is with you in everything you do. Can you guys do some reading with me? Can y'all read the orange words and I'll read the white ones? You guys good? Okay. So that was Jacob. Then Isaac. Isaac was the son of Abraham, and Isaac got in a little pickle, and he was feeling like disconnected, and he wasn't sure what was going on. It said, that night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am. Man, you guys are good. And then Jacob comes in. Jacob's the son of, he's grandson of Abraham, son of Isaac. And Jacob's going to go back. He left for a while because he stole his brother's birthright. And his brother was mad and angry at him when he left. And a few years later, he's coming back home. And the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives. And I will be. Oh my goodness. And then he gets to Moses. The whole nation of Israel is trapped in Egypt. And he says, Moses, I want you to lead my people out of Egypt. It's time for them to take over the land I gave them. You've been in Egypt long enough. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Why are you picking me? I killed an Egyptian and I fled for my life to get out of there. I don't need to go back. They may be still looking for me so many years later. And by the way, I have a speech impediment. I'm not real good at this stuff. And then God says, I will be. And then the guy that took over from Moses, who was going to lead the people through the promised land and let them settle the land. His name was Joshua. And he got to a point where it's like, God, I don't know what to do. I don't know if we can do this. Man, there's so many groups of people here, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. And then, have I not commanded you? He says to Joshua, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be wherever you go. And then the nation of Israel gets established. And all throughout that time, the different groups of people would come when Israel wouldn't do what God was asking them to do. And they were like, he was like, no, you're supposed to be a light to all peoples. You're supposed to be doing this a certain way. And these people would come and conquer them. And they would get out of sorts. And they'd be like, what's going on, God? What have you left? And he would tell through the prophet Isaiah, he says, do not fear, do not be dismayed, for I am your God. Like, I know these things look awful, but listen, I'm using this to show you that I am with you the whole time. And then there was silence for a long, long time. And nobody heard anything from God. Is God still with us? Is God still with us? Is God still with us? And no prophet came to tell them. And no king was connected to God enough to let them hear. And then a prophecy came. An angel appeared to a young woman named Mary. And Matthew writes, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And then Jesus, as he's standing with his disciples, he looks at them. He's died. He's come back to life. And he looks at them as he's about to, he's like, I got to go. I got to leave. I can't stay here in this physical form forever. And he looks at them and he gives them this mission. He says, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am always to the end of the age. How is that possible? Jesus, you left. How are you with us? How is that supposed to work? God, how is he with them? How is he with? And Jesus solved that problem. Just a few days before this, right before his death, he taught his disciples how this was going to work, how he was going to continue being with them when he couldn't be physically with them. It was one of the greatest promises to those of us who believe that could ever be given to us. He said this in John 14. If you love me, keep my commands. And the command he had just given, you know what the command was? Hey, love one another. It's just a real simple command. Hey, keep my commands. If you love me, keep my commands. Love these other people. And I will ask my Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be forever. the Spirit of truth. Listen, God has wanted to be with you since the beginning. Since the beginning, His design was to be with us and for us to be with Him. Jesus did not die so that you could learn the amazing principles of how to live a great life. Was He a great example and a perfect example of how to love people and serve them? Yes. And are there principles you can take from Jesus' life and learn to apply to your life and get better at life? Yes. But He did not die so that you could get those principles. He did not die so that you would understand how serious God is about you behaving well. He did not die so that you would understand you need to behave, you better get it right, and then things will go good. No. He didn't do that. He died for the opposite, actually. He didn't die just so you could get things from God. He didn't die just so you could receive blessings from Him. That's a part of it. God does want to give you good things. And He didn't die just to give you a mission. He didn't die just so you would have something to do with your life. Because someday that mission will be over. He died so you could be with Him. His death solved the problem that kept us from being with God. And His resurrection proved that we could be with God forever. So here's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about switching. From wherever you're at, maybe you're a life over God person. I'd just like you to switch from life over God to life with God this morning, and you can do it this way. Let the systems and formulas you're learning about for a good life lead you to the God who created them. The systems and principles you're applying to make your life better, I want you to understand there's a God behind those. And He loves you so much, He gave those to you to make sure your life would be lived well. But He wants you to come and be with Him while you lead those, while you learn those, while you lead them, while you live them out. Live with God doing it. And if you're under God, He wants you to know, hey, I want you to do the right thing. I want you to do well, but not to earn something from me, but because I'm with you. Do the good things because you know I'm with you already. And then for those of you who are looking for something from God, maybe being with God is better than getting the thing you desire. Maybe just being with God is enough for you right now. Maybe you don't need that thing you want so badly when you compare it to the beauty and the grace and the love you get from your Heavenly Father. And those of you who are stuck in a routine of serving and prideful about how you serve, maybe you should passionately pursue a relationship with God, and the mission will be your greatest joy. Because some of you are about burnout. And you feel like you've been doing it and nobody else has. You've been doing things for God so much that it's run you just dry. But listen, He never meant it for being that way. The mission should be your joy if you're doing it with Him. So my challenge for you is this. Can you switch your point of view about God this morning? Can you be with God? Because here's what I know. This is not about you sitting back and meditating all day long and then not doing anything because you're with God. Oh, guys, the band was kind of joking background because we were talking about this and like, God, I'm with you. You go ahead and just move my hands to play the guitar. Right? That'd be kind of silly. Listen, but here's how this works. Because if you're with God, how long before you start doing the things God does? And if you're truly with Him, how long before you start loving like He does and giving like He does and seeing things from His perspective? Listen, if you can learn to be with God as you walk through this life, it will change how you respond to everything. It will change how you think about your money and what you give and how you give it. It will change how you think about your time, what you do with it, who you spend your time with. Change the way you think about your kids and how you parent. Change the way you respond to people at work. Because here's the thing I know. You won't be chasing some control. Because adulting well means that you own that you do not own God. But He's with you. You may not own Him and you may not be able to use Him to control whatever's going on in your life, but He's with you. So my challenge for you is this week. If God is with me, how does it change the way I blank? How does it change the way you do whatever you do tomorrow? If God is truly with you, here's what I think happens. when you start to really take in that God is with you, the things that you fear that are out of your control, you realize you don't have to be in control of not to fear it. That you actually don't have a control issue, you have an ownership issue. And it is not yours to own some of these things, it is God's to own. And when you let God own what He can own, you can own what you own. And you can walk along with Him in partnership and know that He's with you. And no, it doesn't look like what you thought it would, but He's with you. And that empowers you to choose things that you normally wouldn't choose because you would be afraid. Some of you are afraid right now to approach a boss or a person at work about an issue that you know you need to talk to them about, but you have been scared because it's out of your control. What happens if? What happens if? What happens if? But God is with you. Some of you have been unwilling to get more involved here because it seems scary and out of your control. Like you've loved coming here and learning, and you love the welcoming environment you get from here, but you haven't gotten in a group. You haven't maybe given a little bit of your time on Sunday or during the week to serve other people? Because it seems like so much to give up or so much out of your control if I do that and these new people and learning them and doing this and my time and time management and how do I get all this done? But what if God was with you? Would it change the way you interacted here? Would it change how much you got involved? Would it change how generous you were to the people around you in your life and how forgiving you were for their faults? Because you knew God was with you in the middle of it. This is the challenge for us. And what I find so exciting about this is that if you can switch your mindset to this, you'll find yourself living out of this freedom of knowing that God is with you, and you'll be less scared, less feeling like you're out of control. And you'll spend more of your time focused on the other people in your life that God wants you to notice. Let's pray. God, thank you so much. Thank you for Jesus who has given us freedom. Freedom from our own small view of God. That, God, when He came to be with us for real in the flesh, it was beyond anything we could understand and comprehend. But God, by watching Him die and come back to life, we know He has truly come to be with us and He has left His Spirit here with us. So God, for those of us who believe that, may we grasp that and hold on to that truth and live in the freedom of knowing that we are living with you and you are living with us. And God, I pray for those who have not yet realized this truth, that this week they would look and really self-assess their view of who you are. And they really think about how this life works and whether or not they're trying to use and manipulate you to get what they want versus just maybe coming and being with you. And God, we ask all these things, not because we want to sit back and just enjoy whatever we see in front of us, but because, God, you have given us so many things that we could be a part of if we would let go of our control, if we would release ourselves to be with you. In your Son's name I pray it. Amen.